Hi everyone, my name is Kimberly Gadberry,
And I'm Christina Carrillo.
and we are going to talk about Merrill's principles of instruction.
Alrighty, so our table of contents, we have 4 different components that we have within this presentation. The first part is the introduction, where we will talk about who Merrill is and what he believes. The second part will be the 5 principles of his model. The third is an activity that we created to kind of give an example of how the principles can be met. And then, of course, the last one is the conclusion, which is our references.
Okay.
All right. So who is Merrill? Merrill is currently an educator who has studied and assisted with instructional design theories. He's worked with with many colleges, and currently he is a instructional effectiveness consultant at Utah State University. However, he does also teach some online classes at various other college campuses around the world, which is pretty neat. He's currently in his 80s and still teaching, which is amazing. And he's studied different instructional theories and found a common pattern within all of them, which is why he created this theory and model that we're presenting today. All right, Merrill believed in the 5 principles of instruction. These 5 principles should be applied in each lesson to enrich and assist the learner. The first principle is problem-centered. The second is activation. The third, demonstration. Fourth, application. And fifth, integration.
Yes, and I'm going to briefly go over all of those principles. Here is a picture that pretty much sums up all of the 5 principles. It starts off with an overview of it, and then it gets down to a very specific part of the lesson. So the first principle is problem-centered. So Merrill believes that it's best to start the lesson off with a task that involves the students to problem solve and to think about their background knowledge. So that way they're ready to start learning. And then it leads into the second principle, aviation, which is when the learners are already engaged with information and they're curious and ready to learn more. So this was a big part of scaffolding. Christine and I are both teachers, so we were talking and we were like, we already apply this information in our classroom, so we thought that was interesting. So after you do a task, Merrill believes that you have the students discuss their background knowledge and you fix any prior knowledge that might not be correct, and get the students ready to be where you can build on the information. And I created this little picture using clip art, and aviation would be in the middle. So you already talked about their background knowledge, you get them ready to build onto the new information. The third principle is demonstration. So that's the teaching part. And Merrill really believes that you should not just preach to the students. You should show them multiple different ways of multiple different models of information. So use videos, use music, show them all the different strategies if it's in math. Have the students really engaged with the information. The fourth principle is the application. So that is where the students would be doing the applying the information. And it's going back to scaffolding. So it reminded me of the I do, we do, you do model of teaching. So previously the teacher in the last step is teaching, that's the I do. This is going to be the we do. The teacher is going to scaffold the student, and they're going to slowly release the student to be all on their own. So they should, and it shouldn't just be a one worksheet and done. They should have multiple opportunities to apply their new knowledge. And then the final principle is integration, where the students can showcase information and show their progress that they made. They should have conversations. They should be able to build onto this new information that they just learned. Yeah, it should just be integrated into their lives.
Alrighty, so the activity that we created to go along with this today is an activity that has to do with money, a little lesson with money. So the next slide, all right. Principle 1, of course, is the problem-centered. And like she said, it doesn't have to necessarily be a task at hand. It could also just be a simple question where kids are getting that opportunity to really think about a real life type of problem that could be not only in the classroom, but be used outside of the classroom to solve. And it's really great to do this activity in partners or with group work. So for this one that we created, the students would gather into small groups or with a partner, and then the teacher would give them a problem to discuss and try to solve without saying anything else about the lesson. It's just from the very beginning, almost blind, that you're giving them this problem. So I came up with the problem is Mrs. Correa went to the store to buy ice cream. She gave the cashier $5 and received $2.75 in change. How much was the ice cream Mrs. Correa bought? So it just kind of gets students thinking and trying to see like if they know what they're talking about and like building off of each other's knowledge. Then you hop on over to the second principle, which is the aviation, where you're building that background knowledge. You're activating that schema within the kids. And what the teacher would do in this activity is they would ask them, have you ever been to a store where you had to buy something? Did you pay in cash? Did you use a card? How did you know how much money to give them? And I provided some example questions there as well. Like I said, how did you figure out how much money to give them? What is the value of each coin? Just building on that background knowledge, which also helps the teacher kind of know where to guide the lesson prior to the demonstration. Then the third part is the demonstration, where in this activity, the students would be given or the teacher would provide students in whole group a question to solve, a money question that also can still be real life. How much was the apples that the person bought at the store or something. And during this, the teacher is not asking the students to solve these problems on their own. It is complete modeling. And while the teacher is modeling this, the students are modeling it firsthand at their tables with coins at the same time, or drawing it. It doesn't have to necessarily be like little coins, but solving it simultaneously with the teacher, just building, lots of modeling. And then we move on to the application. After the demonstration is during the application phase, the students will be given that problem, a different problem to solve. And that is when the teacher is scaffolding and actively monitoring and walking around and, identifying, detecting any errors or misunderstandings that might be occurring. And that this allows for that one-on-one time for a teacher to say, hey, you're doing great, but maybe you should do this instead, or just that constant feedback during the lesson. And then following the application is the integration, which is where really we see what they know. They show what they know. And I put in this activity that they would create their own money problem using coins and bills. And an extension activity for this would be, share it with another peer and have them try to figure out a way to answer that question with a different combination of coins. Instead of 4 quarters for $1, maybe, how many dimes could you do for $1, and so forth. Like I said, this is to go along with Merrill's instructional model to provide just a little bit of an example of what it could look like. However, there's like so many different ways we could do it, So yeah.
Which grade do you think that works best for?
I would probably, you could definitely start this in first grade. You can start it in kinder as well, and work your way up, make it more difficult. I think in first grade, I would probably only use dimes. And then as you get, third grade, I'd use quarters and bills.
Yeah, I like that. Like we talked about earlier, we already do this in our classroom, and these principles really remind me of every day I do a math journal with my students, and I follow these without even knowing that I have been following these, because he takes from all these different learning theories. And I can definitely see a lot of progress in math with my students. So I really like this method.
Absolutely. I think the one thing that really stands out to me with Merrill's is starting off with like the problem centered, because, sometimes we forget to do things like that. And that's kind of a different type of, approach, because starting with a real life problem gets them brainstorming right away,
Yes.
Yeah. And then we have our references available on the last slide.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for watching.
Thanks, guys.